Back in the day when my son was born, I was sure that I knew what I was getting myself into. But boy, was I wrong. I mean, the second I saw that little guy, I realized, oh crap, I gotta keep this kid alive and healthy. I mean, before my wife, I was like a functioning caveman at best. But slowly, over time, I got the hang of it and realized that being a dad wasn't the hardest thing, and I figured it may be best that we just keep the little guy. I mean, his needs were fairly simple to fulfill. Eat, sleep, crap, and play. 4 things that are pretty doable on a must-have list for a baby. Now, I'm sure there's a few of you guys out there that have your own concerns about your fantasy football drafts. Maybe you don't know how to handle it. Well, that's why we're here. Unless you crap your pants. I'm not going to help you with that, and I can't speak for Kyle, but I sure as heck am not going to breastfeed you. What I will give you are a few must-have running backs for 2020 fantasy football. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today, where we're talking about a couple more must-have running backs here for 2020, but maybe you're sitting there thinking, I think I've already seen some must-have running backs from you, Jake. Haven't I? Yes, you have. True statement. I've done a video on must-have running backs already. However, there's a chance that maybe those guys aren't available when you're on the clock. We have to give you multiple options. That's why myself and Kyle go through and do a few of these videos, so you have that deep diving information in your back pocket ready to go during your fantasy football draft, so you're ready no matter what happens when you're actually on the clock. Now, these episodes are usually some of our biggest because people really enjoy the deep diving information, so you're not going to want to miss out on these 2 running backs. So do me a favor, hit the like button, because I'm about to drop a knowledge bomb on you. The first running back we're talking about, it's Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. It is so hard to not get super excited about Miles Sanders and the potential that he has with the Philadelphia Eagles. After the 2019 NFL Combine, I said that Miles Sanders had the chance to be a serious rookie sleeper. I mean, and he really was. And I'm not just saying that. I literally said it on video up on this channel last year. You have a 2019 second-round pick that showed what he could do last year when he was actually given the chance. He finished 2019 with 179 carries, 818 rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground, and then added in 50 receptions for 509 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. That's 1,327 total yards as a rookie. But here's the beauty of it. In 2019, he only had 6 games in which he had 15 plus touches in a game. In those 6 games with those 15 plus touches, he averaged 17.5 fantasy points per game, and because of it, finished as running back 15 overall in half PPR scoring. Now, up until this point, they haven't added anyone to really challenge Miles Sanders in this backfield, especially after the departure of Jordan Howard. Sure, Boston Scott, he's there. He'll get some light work. Now, there's been rumors that, Devonta Freeman's still sitting out there, but those were also the rumors there with Carlos Hyde. He went to Seattle. LaShawn McCoy, he's now in Tampa Bay. As of right now, this is a full workload backfield for one Miles Sanders. Now, last year as a rookie, he had the 13th most targets among all NFL running backs with 63, and he still held a 79.4% catch rate. He also finished top 15 among all NFL running backs in receiving yards with 509, receptions with 50, yards per touch with 5.8 yards, and evaded tackles with 75. Because of those evaded tackles, he was able to create himself an additional 345 yards, which was, yes, also top 15 among all NFL running backs. This guy can just make things happen when he gets the ball in his hands, but he's not super reliant on heavy volume. Out of all the running backs that finished in the top 15, there were only 2 that had fewer touches than Miles Sanders did in 2019. In fact, there are only 7 running backs in NFL history to have had at least 800 yards rushing and 500 yards receiving their rookie year. A couple of those names: Saquon Barkley, Edgerrin James, Marshall Faulk, Gale Sayers. I mean, that is some pretty good company to be in. So as we said back at the start, only 6 games with 15 plus touches for Miles Sanders last year, sharing that backfield. But that does not mean that Philadelphia does not run the ball. They had 454 rush attempts, 7th most in the NFL last year. And we know going into 2020, Alshon Jeffrey, he's not 100% healthy. Marquise Goodwin, he's already opted out. Deshaun Jackson hasn't played 16 games since 2013. That leaves rookie wide receiver Jalen Reagor, second-year wide receiver J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, and Miles Sanders in this offense. Things are looking pretty good for him to have a pretty good share of this offense in 2020. But let's take a look back at 2019. Really go down the stretch. Weeks 12 through 16, Miles Sanders averaged 17 carries and 5 receptions a game. That's a 16-game projection of 272 carries and 80 receptions. But to be honest, I really don't see that much. That's probably a little bit too high. Let's see where he lands if we were to only project him with 15 carries and 4 receptions a game. That's 240 carries and 64 receptions. In my opinion, that is a way more realistic number, because you have to expect that, Boston Scott is still going to be involved in some capacity in this backfield. So let's just take a look at his averages and kind of see where he falls with this amount of touches. Now, 240 carries multiplied by his average 4.6 yards per carry gives him just over 1,100 yards rushing. 64 receptions times his 10.2 average yards per reception gives you right around 650 receiving yards. Now, he only averaged a touchdown once every 60 rush attempts and once every 17 receptions. So we're going to add in 8 total touchdowns to this projection. That's a total of 255 half PPR fantasy points. That would have been good enough to make him the running back 7 overall in 2019, but maybe you're still sitting there. Maybe you still think these projections are just a little bit high. Well, how much wiggle room does Miles Sanders have just to keep him inside the top 10 running backs? Now, over the past 5 years of data, the average points scored by the running back 10 overall are 206 half PPR fantasy points. That gives us a 49-point buffer just to keep Miles Sanders inside the top 10. That is a huge, huge fantasy point buffer. Now, right now, he's currently being drafted as running back 11 overall. So at worst, he should at least return his investment during your fantasy football drafts. And do not forget, he's running behind an above average, one of the top offensive lines in all of football. This kid is going to have an opportunity, a potentially huge opportunity. And we've talked about some of the efficiencies. He's not reliant on huge touches. If he gets a bump in volume at all, which you have to assume he's going to, not really sharing this backfield anymore, this kid could absolutely explode. And I love the potential investment on my fantasy football draft day in taking Miles Sanders. A lot of people are going to go for the big names. If he falls into your lap, I'm not disappointed with it one bit. Love me some Miles Sanders here in 2020. Now, the second guy. I've broken him down in depth probably about 2-3 months ago, but a lot of people weren't around to get a lot of that information. So I'm gonna regurgitate some of that because there is some great information surrounding one Austin Ekeler of the Los Angeles Chargers, another one of these guys that if he's available, I must have in 2020. A lot of people torn on what the hell to do with Austin Ekeler here in 2020, right? People were all on board last year with no Melvin Gordon, and that's for sure, but heck, they were even on board once Melvin Gordon came back, and deservedly so. Austin Ekeler was a top 6 overall fantasy running back in 2019. The dude had 1,500 total yards last season, and he did it with only having one game in which he had 10 plus carries after week 4. But now, everyone wants to hop off the bandwagon because they drafted Joshua Kelly in the 4th round. I get that. Kelly will likely take some carries in this offense. But didn't Melvin Gordon do the same thing? I mean, take a look at Melvin's most work of the season. It happened between weeks 9 and week 14. Over that span, he averaged 17.6 carries per game. Now, during that same span, Austin Ekeler only averaged 8 carries per game but was still the running back 5 in fantasy football during that span. The Chargers threw the ball to their running backs more than any other team in 2019, with 182 targets going their way. The next closest teams, New England with 166, New Orleans with 154, and Carolina with 152. So it's cool to love Josh Kelly, but is he going to come in there and get 200 carries and make Austin Ekeler an afterthought? No, he's really not. Josh Kelly isn't a threat to take the passing work. Heck, last year, the dude only had 11 receptions in college, and that was for the entire season. Maybe you're worried that Josh Kelly comes in and takes all the goal line carries away from Austin Ekeler. No worries. Ekeler only had 6 all last year anyway. Ekeler still finished 2019 top 5 among all NFL running backs in targets with 108, receptions with 92, receiving yards with 993, yards per touch with 6.9, a catch percentage of 85.2, and he finished 7th overall in fantasy points per game with 16.4. He also led all running backs in receptions of 15 or more yards with 21. That's 3 more than Christian McCaffrey had. If you want to take away those 2 rushing touchdowns that he had inside the 5-yard line, that's fine. He still would have finished as running back 6 on the year last year. This offensive line has improved. They've brought in Brian Bulaga from Green Bay, and they swapped out aging tackle Russell Okung for all-pro guard Trey Turner from Carolina. They let Melvin Gordon walk, and they chose to extend Ekeler. They'll have playmakers all over the defensive side of the football to try to keep their opponent's scores lower and more possessions in the offense's hands. They still have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, and that's enough to keep the boxes from being stacked. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people say, Ekeler really benefited because Rivers constantly checked down to him. That's not really the case. Those people that say that don't watch the film, because if you really watch the film, you'll realize the bulk of his receptions were design plays passing the ball to the running back out of the backfield. This guy is super efficient and doesn't need huge volume in the run game. The biggest question mark here is quarterback. Tyrod Taylor, Justin Herbert. Rookie quarterbacks tend to lean on the running backs a little bit more, and Tyrod Taylor isn't exactly Drew Brees back there relying on throwing the ball 50 times a game. But remember, he doesn't need huge volume. Out of all of the top 15 running backs in 2019 fantasy football, Austin Ekeler had the fewest touches out of all of them with only 224 total touches. If they can get anything going at all in the passing game, watch out for Austin Ekeler to run wild again and really pay attention to his ADP here in the offseason, because right now it's actually trending down. He's on the verge of slipping into the 3rd round, and if that happens, there's very little risk with Austin Ekeler. I'm all on board with him here in 2020. So those are 2 more running backs that I absolutely love here for 2020 fantasy football. And hopefully you found this information interesting and useful. If you did, do me a favor, hit the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, because this is what we do. We give you a lot of information to help you, the team owner, make decisions during your fantasy football draft and all year long, just trying to bring home as many championships as we possibly can. But we greatly appreciate your support, and I'm curious. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have their doubts on these 2 running backs. If there's something different than the Phillip Rivers argument, throw it down below, because I'm telling you, these 2 guys have the potential to absolutely explode, and I'm just curious if you're not on the bandwagon with me as to why you're not on the bandwagon with me. So love to be interactive. We love to interact and talk with you guys down below in the comment section. We're not out there to say we're better than anybody. We're not saying that we're smarter than you. We're trying to put our collective heads together so that we can absolutely kill it once again here in 2020. Looking forward to that. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your weekend, a good week next week, and we'll be talking to you later.